Hello and welcome back to the second part of Chapter 7 where we're talking about content creation. And in this case, we were talking about blogging. And so we want to pick that up with the tools that will help you do some blogging. And so you can actually create a website, and there's some free tools out there, Weebly, Wix. We mentioned WordPress over again. That's going to be a little bit more complicated to use and set up. But there's also other types of web development tools that will help you create a website and then start blogging on that site. And so today, instead of just reading a blog, you can actually respond to the blogs. You can do this, what the book calls here, a write web. And so you're able to actually create content based on what somebody else is blogging. And so this allows users to interact more with that content, which is what you want. You want them to start adding to the content you've already put out there, and that gets them involved, and hopefully other people will see that and they will start to come back and interact more, and so that builds more brand awareness for you. Some things you need to keep in mind is that when you're creating a blog or you've decided to use a blog, that there are actually millions of blogs out there, and so you'll be competing with them to attract your different types of visitors. And so you're going to have to do something that's going to be a little bit unique. And so again, when we talk about looking at that long tail and doing a niche for your content, then you might attract those users that are in that area. So you're not going to go after the average kind of user of whatever topic you're looking at. So try and keep it a unique in a small area that you're focusing on. So you should also think about why you're going to use a blog and what are the advantages of using a blog. Is that something you want to use? So again, when you do a blog, you're actually providing a thoughtful post. Your ideas can be fully developed, and then people then will come to that site looking for information. You keep in mind, they're not coming just for the heck of it. They've done some kind of search and they found whatever they're looking for to be part of your blog. And so you want to make sure that you're looking at what people are searching for in order to find you. Now, you may want to continue to use those search results to help with your content and things that you're using. The other thing here with blogs, it's very much in keeping with the word of mouth type of marketing. And so by having those blogs, it makes it easier for people to share. They can either share a link or they can copy the content and paste it somewhere else. And so it allows people to interact. So once they see your blog, people can respond underneath if you've enabled that feature in the blogging software that you've set up. Also keep in mind that a lot of blogs that are out there don't return anything to the blog's creators. Now that may be changing. I've seen some blogging that is trying to link to Amazon and trying to increase sales of certain items on Amazon through their blogging. And so then there's a potential there for the blogger to generate some revenue based on how their blogging site is redirecting those readers to a purchase on Amazon. Some other interesting findings about blogs is that you have lots of corporate blogs out there that aren't really doing anything. They don't really have a well-defined set of objectives, and so they might just be posting stuff and not really having any outcomes in mind. Another finding is that over half the blogs are probably abandoned within 90 days. And so you have to really think about, okay, if I'm going to do a blog, am I really going to commit the time and resources in order to generate new content on a timely basis? If you do make that commitment, then one of the things that you can use that blog for is to kind of find the tone of what the online community has towards the topic that you're writing about. You should also stay current in what's going on in the blog industry. And so it's not just you start up your blog, but there may be other technologies that are coming about that helps the blogger get their content out and disseminated in a much broader way. And so if you miss that, then you're going to be behind on that. You also want to make sure that you're able to run some kind of analytics on your blog site so that you can get a feel for what your readers are doing, why they're coming there, why they might be leaving and not staying. Maybe they're only staying long enough to read the main blog and not picking up on what others might be posting there, and maybe you want them to be more involved and interact more. And so you need to make sure you're going to be monitoring your blog so you can use it for the best purposes you can. The next thing I want to talk about is video streaming. And so that can also be part of your social media mix. So it's a different channel that you can use based on whatever your strategy is and who you're going after. And so video streaming is just a live video broadcast that you're sharing over the internet. So again, you got to think about the different types of devices people might be using and where they might be doing. And so if you're targeting farmers in rural America, you probably don't want to be doing some kind of video streaming because they're more than likely to have bad or slow internet service, and doing some kind of video streaming is not going to work, and it'll make them frustrated, and they may not ever come back to look at your content again. And so there are apps out there that you can use that'll help you do the video streaming. One is called Periscope and the other one's called Meerkat. So if you ever wanted to go look at those, you could use those. And so if you were, let's say, a food critic and you wanted to show the food that you're currently eating, you could use Periscope and actually stream that out. And so it's best for live interactive content, so you need to be doing something that's very interactive that your users would want to see and see in a live format. So again, it goes back to your strategy. Is this something that's part of that strategy that you think viewers would want to do? Also, when you're video streaming, your viewers then would comment on the video and what's happening at the moment. So hopefully that would get that more engagement about your content and generate a buzz, a word of mouth type of thing. And then so when you're streaming, and you need to also think about when is it best done. And so it needs to be shared online when other forms of social media are also being used. And then the last thing on this slide is it's something you need to be aware of. If you're going to start streaming things live, then you need to be aware that there might be some video piracy that would take place, and things that people, that if you didn't get their permission, you couldn't or shouldn't actually broadcast that out, and that can run into some legal problems for you. The next thing we want to talk about is something called podcasting. Again, this can be part of your social media mix. And so a podcast, you see a definition here, is a digital audio or video file that is episodic. So there's usually more than one. It comes out on a certain time frame, might be daily, might be weekly, and so on. I know there are some radio shows that you might hear in the mornings, and they actually create their own podcast for people who missed the radio show, and they can download it on a daily basis. There might be technical podcasts that people get on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, but it needs to be some form, some time frame where people can come back and get it. And it's not going to be pushed out to them. They're going to have to go out and find it and download it. There's certain type of content that each of the podcasts will have, and they're all very similar. Um, and so there's usually a host, someone that's talking, and there's a theme that they can get it. So an example might be, the Journal of Information Technology and Politics. So you can see what that theme might be every week or every month. And so you can also think about what I'm doing right now could be considered a podcast. So I'm sitting here at my computer. I've got some recording software going. I've got a mic going, and I'm talking away. And so then I save that, and then I edit it if I need be, and then I put it out there for you guys to listen to and watch. Now, I also have a video camera that I could turn on, and then you could see me with my hand movements going and sitting here at my chair. But that, it really doesn't add any value, and it just makes the file even larger. So I keep that turned off. Now, if we continue on this slide here, then the podcast could just be only audio, or it could be audio and video. Sometimes when it's called audio, when it has both audio and video, it's called a vodcast. And so we can either stream them directly off of a website, or we could download them and play them later. Typically, if it's a large file and you don't have good internet access, you would download them to actually listen to them or watch them at a later time. Right? They're going to be portable. You can put them on an MP3 player for listening offline. And so hopefully everybody is able to see these videos. I've not heard any problems, but I put them in an MP4 format, and you can go out there and find all kinds of MP4 players. So you're going to need a player in order to play the podcast. And so you need to make that as easy as possible for your audience to download or stream the podcast, and then also have a player that will play the file. So you don't want to create it in some obscure file format that people would have a hard time finding a player for. So when you decide that you're going to use a podcast and that it's what's part of your strategy, there are different types of podcasts that you can do. So one might just be a live monologue, or you just give a simple talk on a subject. So if I wanted to show how you would set up a website and create a website, maybe I'll just do that. But that's more or less a one-time thing. So it's an instructional podcast or video. You could also have a question and answer type of podcast where you have people come in and answer questions, or you have a set of questions already and then you answer it. So you might have something like for newly incoming freshmen on how to register for classes. So, you might be used to, or I would be used to, a typical set of questions that I've heard over the years, and so I might do a Q&A and just say, here's one question that I get a lot, and here's the solution for it. Here's another one, and so on. You could also do a co-hosted kind of site where you have two people and they're talking back and forth about some topic, and maybe people would like to download that and go from there. I know I talked earlier about a radio show. It just keeps coming up because it's a good example. And so, the Bob and Sherry radio show. So you could go out to iTunes and download that and get a subscription. And so you could listen to that wherever you might be, even if it's not on the radio, wherever you are for the day. So when you do the content for your podcast, you're thinking they're instructional, they're informative, or they're some kind of entertainment. So the Bob and Sherry show, that would be entertainment. And so I've also subscribed to some technical podcasts that deal with computers and things, which makes it nice if you want to learn some more information on that. And so you don't want to try and create a podcast that would appeal to a broad audience. Again, we're looking at that niche again. And so you want to focus on the interest of your target audience. Some things to be aware of when you're producing your podcast is you want to try and find an articulate moderator. And so that means you're finding somebody that doesn't use a lot of verbal static. So the ums, ahs, okay, those sort of things. Things that I'm probably doing. I try to avoid them, but there comes a time when you're doing this and then you get not distracted, but say the phone rings and then you're trying to come back after you've paused it. And so you need to find somebody that's used to doing these. And the only way you get used to doing these is just keep practicing and keep doing it. You want to create your talking points, so major outlines, if you will. You don't want to have a script of everything you're going to say. Some people like to have a script and they would actually read it off a monitor, and that just doesn't come across very well. You also want to think about how long this should be. How long would people listen to something? So for me, I try to keep things in the 20-minute range because that's what research has shown, how long people will pay attention to something. After 20 minutes, their mind starts wandering and they're not paying attention anymore. So if you know what you're going to be talking about, try and plan it out so you're in a certain type of time frame. You don't want to try and edit a lot of things out that can make the podcast sound really choppy and not very professional. So for me, I usually can do one of these without having many interruptions or having to go back and fix things where I might have gotten off track or said the wrong thing. One thing that I'm not doing, though, is including some music. And so they say try and include a little music at the beginning to make it a little bit more professional. So maybe I can try some music in the beginning of the videos, and I should probably also do the same thing in my classes. So how do you get your podcasts out to people? Well, you can actually put them on certain things like iTunes, Zoom, Sony and Philips, and others that where your audience might be hanging out and they know to go and look for it. You should go to iTunes and look around and see what kind of podcasts are out there. You'd be amazed at the different types of learning opportunities that are available to you by just listening to different types of podcasts. You can also go out there and look at certain search engines for finding certain things. So Podscope, digital podcasts, again, iTunes, and so on. So they're out there. You just got to make your audience aware of them. So maybe you might be using podcasts in addition to your blog. And so when you're blogging about something, you might mention the podcast and have a link to the podcast. So you're using these different applications together for your social media marketing, and you're coming up with a mix of different strategies in order to do whatever you're wanting to do. Another thing you can do is make sure that you fill in all the attributes for the file name in your podcast. So fill in what they say here, the ID3 tag, and so what that includes your title, author's name, description, and the length of the running time. And so anything you can do to help the search engines index and catalog your podcast makes it easier to find. So lastly, about podcasts, some things to keep in mind is that you got to make sure you're committed to doing this and that it's going to meet your strategy and your objectives. It can, if you're doing a podcast, there's ways to generate revenue with it other than um, having videos with embedded advertising. You could actually get sponsors to advertise in there. You could also try and get people to subscribe to your content. If you're going to do that, it needs to be really, really good content. People really don't like to pay for something that's typically going to be free from other areas. And so if you want an example of some really good podcasts, look at something called Mugglecast and Pottercast, which came up through the the Harry Potter movies. And so they were able to do some podcasts on that and then look for ways that they've used that in order to generate revenue. So it might be just selling additional items or linked items and stuff that they're talking about, or just the fact that they're talking about a certain item and they tell you where you can go to buy it if you want. So maybe then they can actually keep track of where the user was before they went to that site. And if it comes from this Mugglecast or Pottercast, then they get a little percentage of the revenue generated by sending visitors to that other site who bought something. So this is going to be a longer chapter, so I'm going to pause here and we're going to have a part 3 when I come back.